I want to ask you something interesting. How did humanity first discover being high, or getting drunk, or altering your state of mind? Who figured this out first? When did it start? Where did it happen? The answer is going to genuinely surprise you, because this story doesn't start with humans, it starts with monkeys. By the way, no AI here. This video is the result of days of research. I know a lot of channels do it differently. This one doesn't. Just wanted to be upfront with you. Let's start from the very beginning. For 25 years, UC Berkeley biologist Robert Dudley asked himself the same question. Why do humans love alcohol so much? And he came up with a hypothesis, which is drunken monkey hypothesis. Here's the hypothesis. Millions of years ago, the ancestors of our ancestors, monkeys and apes, ate ripe fruit, and ripe fruit ferments on its own. Wild yeast eats up all the sugar in the fruit, and that process produces alcohol. So overripe fruit was slightly alcoholic by nature, and primates were in love with it. In 2022, scientists actually ran a test. In Panama, researchers collected fruit eaten and left by spider monkeys. The result? That fruit had an alcohol in it about 1 to 2%. And when researchers analyzed the monkey's urine, they found something surprising. The alcohol was being metabolized. So these monkeys weren't just eating fermented fruit by accident. Their bodies were processing it, using it for energy. For the first time, science proved it. Wild primates with zero human involvement were regularly consuming alcohol-containing fruit. So here's the crazy part. This means our attraction to alcohol isn't a human invention. It's tens of millions of years old. We already had it in ourselves. Some researchers even suggest that alcohol abuse is just an evolutionary hangover, a deep ancient craving for fermented sugar. Except now, we've turned it into something thousands of times more concentrated: beer, wine, liquor. Our ancestors were never built for that. Okay, so that explains alcohol. But what about everything else? What about cannabis? What about mushrooms? This is where things get even more interesting. Let's start with cannabis. For a long time, the earliest evidence for cannabis use as a drug was just a story. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote around 440 BC that a nomadic group called the Scythians threw hemp seeds onto red-hot stones inside tents, inhaled the smoke, and shouted for joy. For centuries, historians weren't sure if this was even true. Then, in 2019, archaeologists found the proof. In the Pamir Mountains, on the border of China and Central Asia, researchers excavated a 2,500-year-old cemetery. Inside the tombs, they found wooden bowls with burned stones inside, braziers, used for burning something. When scientists analyzed the residue, they found cannabis, and not just any cannabis. This cannabis had unusually high levels of THC, the compound that gets you high, which means these ancient people weren't just growing hemp for rope or fabric, they were specifically selecting plants for their pleasuring effect 2,500 years ago. In Yanghai, in northwestern China, archaeologists found a burial pit containing nearly 2 pounds of cannabis. It belonged to a man believed to be a shaman, from a culture dating back roughly 2,700 years. Researchers concluded the cannabis was used for what they called pharmaceutical, psychoactive, or divinatory practices. In other words, medicine, getting high, and communicating with the spirit world all at once. To them, these weren't separate categories. But here's the thing. Even 2,700 years isn't the beginning. On the Oki Islands in Japan, archaeologists found dried cannabis plants dating back to roughly 8,000 BEC, 8,000 years before Jesus Christ. At that point, cannabis was likely being used for multiple purposes: food, fishing line, clothing, and possibly its effects on the mind too. So by the time written history even begins, humans already had thousands of years of experience with this plant. Now, let's talk about something even older than the cannabis, the opium poppy. In 2022, archaeologists in Israel made a discovery they called the first identifiable, without doubt, opium use in the entire Old World. At a Bronze Age burial site called Tel Yehud, they found small ceramic jugs, imported all the way from Cyprus. And these jugs weren't just decorative. Scientists tested the residue inside them, and it was opium. This dates back to around 1,400 BC. That's about 600 years older than the cannabis evidence we just talked about. But here's the part that really gets me. Researchers had actually suspected this for over a century. Because of the shape of the jug, they look exactly like an upside-down poppy flower, with the bulb closed. People in the 1800s looked at these jugs and said, "This looks like a poppy." And it took until 2022 to actually prove they were right, and it goes back even further. Poppy seeds have been found alongside Utsi, the famous 5,300-year-old mummy frozen in the Alps. And archaeobotanists have traced cultivated opium poppies in Europe back to around 5,900 BC, so somewhere along the way. Multiple ancient cultures looked at the same flower and figured out the exact same thing. Now, let's talk about mushrooms, because this might be the most mind-bending part of the entire video. Deep in the Sahara Desert, in a place called Tassili Najjar in Algeria, there's a rock painting that's roughly 7,000 to 9,000 years old. It shows a humanoid figure with what looks like mushrooms growing out of its body and limbs, and from the figure's head, there are dotted lines extending outward. Researchers believe these dotted lines represent something specific: the psychoactive effects radiating from the mushrooms into the person's mind. This is now considered the oldest known depiction of psilocybin mushroom use in human history, 9,000 years ago. In a desert that today barely has any mushrooms at all, people were painting what appears to be a shaman tripping. And get this, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. Back then, it was green. It had rivers, lake, grassland. So this wasn't some isolated, desperate act. This was part of daily life, part of ritual, part of how these communities understood the world around them. And now here's a twist that connects to something we've talked about before on this channel. Remember how agriculture changed everything for ancient humans? Bigger populations, new diseases, new social structures. There's a theory that says agriculture itself might be connected to alcohol. It's sometimes called the beer before bread hypothesis. The idea is this: some researchers believe that early humans may have started cultivating grain not primarily to make bread, but to make beer, grain left in water with wild yeast ferment. And fermentation isn't just about getting a buzz, it also makes nutrients easier for the body to absorb, and it can help preserve food longer. So in a strange way, the desire to recreate that fermented, slightly intoxicating effect might have played a role in one of the biggest turning points in human history, the agricultural revolution. Some historians push back on this. It's still debated, but the timing is suspicious. Either way, it's wild to think that the search for that feeling might be older than farming itself. So now, let's zoom out. What do all of these have in common? Alcohol, cannabis, opium, mushrooms, all four go back thousands, or in the case of alcohol, millions of years. All of them were tied to community, to ritual, to survival, to making sense of the world. None of them were invented for fun the way we often think about it today. And here's something that should make you pause. The human brain has receptors specifically built to interact with these substances. THC binds to receptors that already existed in our brains before cannabis ever entered the picture. Our bodies already had systems in place, and these plants just happened to fit perfectly into them. It's almost like our biology was already halfway there, waiting for these substances to show up. So when you really think about it, humans didn't really discover getting high in some single dramatic moment. It was a slow, layered process, going back tens of millions of years to a monkey eating an overripe piece of fruit, then thousands of years to a shaman in the Sahara, painting what he saw in his mind, then thousands of years to a burial ritual in the mountains of Central Asia. Each one a small piece of a much bigger picture, a picture that started long, long before any of us were here. So here's my question for you. Out of everything we covered today, which one surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. See you in the next one. Bye.